to welcome you all again to our Impact Investing Conference. The future is in your hearts and hands. And now we start with our first panel session. We have 2 more panel sessions followed by the closing keynote. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Tess once again for a wonderful introductory keynote. Wonderful session. So I want to thank the moderators and the speakers for taking this time to come and talk about this very important topic. This is a conversation that has to be had so that we can make sure that we can effect change. And so I'm so pleased to have this conference. And once again, I also want to thank Lauren and her team at SIIA, Mike and his team at TIA, and Paola and Gagliato for making this conference possible by working with the University of St. Thomas. So thank you all again for being here, and over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so I suspect the acoustics in here are good enough that I don't need a mic. Am I correct?
Perfect. Speak from the table, right?
Exactly. So, thank you, Dr. George, again, for such a warm welcome, and to Tess for an incredible opening to what we hope has been an informative conference so far. As Dr. George mentioned, my name is Lauren Kosler, and I'm a recovering social worker. So, we're all recovering from something, and in my recovery, I decided to become a fundraiser. So, I have worked in fundraising for both nonprofits and for-profits for the last 15 years or so. But no one wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I really want to ask people for money for a living. I just don't think that happens. Believe me, I didn't. But what I found over the course of working in social work and working with nonprofit organizations, public institutions, hospitals, and universities was that they didn't need another social worker. What they needed was money. And so I thought, all right, well, you know, if this is what they really need and I want to make a difference, then I'm going to go become the best fundraiser I can be. And so that's what I did. And that's what this conference today is all about mobilizing the resources, the capital necessary to impact real lasting change. So, as Tess highlighted, the spectrum in terms of capital and money movements to fund social impact runs from traditional philanthropy all the way through the investment spectrum. And so today I'm really excited to have with us some wonderful representatives of social enterprise models who have benefited from impact investing, of nonprofit organizations, and a hybrid of the two. And so we're going to talk about what those models look like and how they can be effective if you're interested in impacting social change as well. So I'm going to briefly introduce Danny, Shiroy, and Paola, and we're going to welcome them and invite them to tell us a little bit about their idea, their mission, their vision, and why they chose the model that they did to fund what they hope to accomplish in terms of social impact. So I'm going to invite Danny to share with us first, and then we're going to go down the row. I do have access to Slido, so if you got a little slip of paper at the opening, welcome your questions. Keep it clean. Welcome your questions. So, Danny, why don't you take us through your mission, your vision, and the model that you chose?
Okay. So, the first thing I'm going to ask is if there's anybody here that recognizes somebody who's at the conference but it's not here, shoot them a text and tell them to come by the panel, because I think we're going to talk about some really exciting things. So, that's the first thing. But what we do at Scribbly RX is we help people save money on medication, but what's interesting about us is we are the only ethically sourced tech platform. And essentially, what that means is 2 things, right? Helping people save money on their meds, but 2, when you save with our model, when a user saves with our model, they're not supporting the predatory pricing practices of big pharma. So some of them you might have heard of, some maybe not so, but things like clawbacks, formulary exclusions, spread pricing, right? All of those are practices that very few beneficiaries use to prop up the artificially high prices of the net. So we created a model that completely bypasses that and keeps the majority of the money, right, all of the money really, right, except for our transaction fee, into the system. So that's what we do, right, and our vision is to help people save money on prescriptions. I mean, it's really that easy, right, but to do it the right way. And, you know, the model that we chose, and are we going to get to this?
We will, but back it up for us a little bit,
Okay.
Amy. Tell us a little bit about you
Okay.
and about why you thought this was a problem that required a solution.
So there are 165 million people in the U.S. who are either underinsured or uninsured, right? And so this problem goes on every day. And when we launch, we work with a lot of food banks, right? Because they serve, you know, a large underserved community. And I'm not sure how many of you know this, but there are 30 million people who not only struggle with buying food, but every month, right, so May, June, the rest of the year, they're going to have to make a decision on whether or not they're going to buy food for their family or fill their medication, right? Like, these problems are real, and I'm just going to touch on one thing regarding my background. I was a public health worker, right, and so when you hear these large aggregate numbers, right, 165 million, 30 million, right, they're impactful numbers, but it's a totally different thing when you're working with that mom, right, that dad, those children every day, right? And I'm going to kind of take everybody back to last year in our state, right? There was a teacher who had the flu. This is a simple $17 fix. She had the flu. She couldn't afford her medication because they priced it at like 107 or something like that. And so she decided to bypass it because the flu is relatively common. Ends up passing away, leaving her children, right, and her family behind. And so it's a prevalent problem, and it's a real problem, not just an academic problem.
And now when it came time to conceptualize a solution, you identified a problem. How did you conceptualize a solution that ended up becoming Strictly?
Yeah. So originally, we actually launched as Good Neighbor. And what we thought the problem was simply how much people are saving. But after about a year and a half or so, what we come to find out was that independent pharmacies are often filling prescriptions at a loss, right? Independent pharmacies on average lose about $2 million a year, each of them, filling prescriptions with traditional formularies, right? So when we were getting calls from pharmacies saying, hey, thank you for the customer, don't send them back, we kind of dug into why that was. And the solution was relatively simple. Work with the right people who don't try to capitalize on the needs of consumers.
Thanks, Dan. And we will come back to questions. I have dozens. But I'm going to pass it on to Shiroy to tell us about the problem that he identified and the solution that he conceptualized, and a little bit about yourself and what brought you through this process.
Sure, would you like me to talk about one jump or impact hub?
Let's talk about one jump and then we'll come back to impact hub.
Sure, okay. Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Shiroy Aspandiar, and I came to Houston in 2010 through Teach for America. There I got really exposed to the problem that one jump would eventually play a part in solving. So as an educator of high school students, I realized that a lot of my students lacked access to social capital building opportunities. I think of those as activities or experiences that increase your sense of self-worth, build skills, explore new opportunities, exposure, really. That's super important for first-generation college students and at-risk and underserved youth. I realized that their more affluent peers were accessing these opportunities, and that made it so they could walk into certain kinds of rooms and spaces and feel really comfortable. Think your college camp at a local university, or maybe some sort of enrichment or after-school program that really skills them up. And we realized that these opportunities exist. There's thousands of them nationwide, and nobody had taken the trouble to really aggregate, curate them, to create a platform where students felt like they were being heard, or they were being really spoken to through deliberate marketing, and that's what OneJump does. So OneJump is a web platform that curates tens of thousands of opportunities nationwide. We provide resources to first-generation and underserved students to access them, and then finally provide micro scholarships up to about $500 per student to go on an amazing summer or after-school enrichment activity. So that was started in about 2016, and I think you want to get into corporate structure maybe down a little bit. We actually elected to choose a nonprofit corporate structure for that venture. I have a lot of thoughts on that. I'm not sure if I could go back in time. I think I would probably create a hybrid corporate structure for this type of venture, given that technology is difficult to scale, it's very expensive. We got quite a bit of mentor whiplash, quite a bit of differing opinions about what the right corporate structure to choose for this kind of venture would be, and something I'm happy to explain more in the panel.
And Shiroy is one of the leaders of Impact Hub Houston, which addresses challenges for social entrepreneurs across our community. So I do want you to mention a little bit about Impact Hub.
Sure. Impact Hub is a global network of 100 social innovation hubs across the world. Our CEO Executive Director, Grace Rodriguez, is here as well, and I think it's going to be a part of another panel, so she can share more about that too. But what we do is we help local social entrepreneurs, change makers, supporters in a local city connect to resources, connect to community, connect to programming opportunities, and also like a place to work and feel at home through our Impact Hub in our city, and then also connect to other entrepreneurs throughout the world. Our focus is really to help accelerate and support entrepreneurs who are focused on those SDGs that we talked about earlier to create a better world collectively. And so Impact Hub is one of those global organizations that's working to really create these collaborative communities that solve problems. And I was part of the co-founding team in part because it solved a personal problem for me. I was not finding that in Houston. The conversation was around SaaS and tech and in a way that I didn't really feel got social impact, understood social enterprise. And so when I came across this network of people who are trying to build a better world through entrepreneurship, I was like, this is exactly the community that I want to be a part of. And so we're really happy to be bringing it to Houston.
Thanks, Shiroy. And Paola, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and then also the problem that you identified and your solution?
Yes, well, thank you, and hello to everyone. Well, my accent immediately betrays I'm from Houston, not even from the United States. I was born and raised in Italy. Very socially oriented since a very young age. I was the youngest councilwoman in my hometown. And I went on pursuing my dream, which was to work for that place in that building where all the nations come together, address world problems, and then try and find solutions, which was the United Nations. That was a very far-fetched ambition for a little girl in a part of Italy, Europe, which is a little bit remote. Eventually, I ended up working in the UN, but soon enough, like my husband, I went from 0 children to 5 children in a span of 1 year, having adopted 3 and having a set of twins right after. So I had to reinvent myself. The international career was no longer at my horizon. Serendipitously, my husband and I ended up in a part of Italy which is the poorest, one of the most background reality in whole Europe is called Calabria. And we landed in a little village, and that little village where talent in kids is everywhere, but opportunity are completely lacking, so opportunity is not universal, whereas talent is universal. We discovered a community that became the breeding ground for an incredible laboratory. Every year we bring scientists from all over the world to this little village of 400 people. And they talk about nanoscience because that's the field of expertise of my husband. And through the assembly of creative minds from all over the world, from the STEM arena, we were able to develop a lot of spin-offs out of this international festival. The little town has become a creative town mentioned in the UNESCO Global Report at Habitat in 2016, and out of that thing, many little enterprises were born. We have now a town that was on the declining curve, population was dwindling, no opportunities for anybody to stay and find a job, and now the children have found, the young people there have found reasons and motivation, and also pride to stay and become entrepreneurs. We help them through this, but at the same time, I was constantly, had this problem of how do I fund the activities that we are doing with the science component. We have an academia for children, and we teach them about nanoscience too. To find resources for this opportunity was a constant challenge. So I said, why don't I do something which is a little bit on the circular? So from impact, I derived inspiration to create a for-profit, and then for-profit will channel the money into the non-for-profit. So this is the model that we've been developing, and we're still on the learning curve.
Well, and Paola, I love that you mentioned it in the social impact space. We call that the virtuous cycle. So for traditional philanthropists looking to fund their philanthropic causes, sometimes that meant that they were pulling from an investment strategy to fund philanthropic investments in institutions they care about, often universities or hospitals. This also is applicable to vendors. So I've worked with MD Anderson and Will Herman, and the first people that I go to when I need money is people who are getting money from me. So looking at that virtuous cycle, I think is applicable across the board for Danny, Shiroy, and Paola, knowing that funding their model is going to be a challenge. And so I'd love to talk a little bit more about your solution, about the structure that you developed for your solution, and your challenges. We know that this isn't easy. When we're trying to solve big problems, we end up with big challenges. So, Danny, tell us a little bit about the model and the structure for your solution and some of the challenges you found, specifically related to funding.
So I'll start with the challenge. Kind of, it's more so perspective. I had a chance to talk with Lauren a little bit before the panel, and when we classify like social impact as a subcategory of business, right? I don't think we ever get to the point where we look at it like a business, right? But if you think about it, right, all consumer businesses are designed for social impact in some way, right? They're designed, they create a product that has value, and then they bring it to people who need it, right, or who want it. The issue comes in when we see, okay, I can make X amount here, but if I cut, I can now make X times whatever amount. And unfortunately, it seems to be that social impact, right, social, I guess, parts of your business seem to be where people are most comfortable making cuts, right? So I'll say that perspective is probably the biggest challenge that I face when it comes to raising money, right? Because when you're a social impact business, how does that work? Well, we're just a business, so that's right. So that's number one. So the model, we're lucky for our model in the sense that we're able to build in viability kind of in our model. So when somebody uses our platform to save, we collect a revenue fee or a shared fee on the back end from one of our providers, right? And so when I say we're lucky is there's already about $25 that should be on the table for other people in the value chain, right? Payers, insurers, companies, users. Right now, all that money is being taken, right, by big pharma. That's why they're called big pharma, because they're actually taking quite a bit of cash and putting it in their pocket. And so what we said was, let's take that money, take the lowest fee that we can to be sustainable and build a for-profit business, right? And then give that money back to where it needs to be. So that's what our model is like.
And again, that speaks to the virtuous cycle. Knowing that you don't have to sacrifice returns and profitability in order to do so. And again, across this table, we're on the spectrum. For-profit enterprises, non-profit enterprises, and with Paola, a hybrid. Her for-profit feeding her non-profit. So Shiroy, why don't you tell us about your solution and the structure that you chose?
So for OneShow, we built a web platform that had an opportunity database for students, but we realized that we wouldn't be able to build a sustainable revenue stream ever from asking low-income students to pay. That didn't make any sense to us to define our mission. So to build sustainability, what we did was we built a suite of tools for educators that we then sold to districts and principals to be able to more deeply engage in a whole school initiative or a whole district initiative around enrichment access. So because we're a 501c3 nonprofit, a significant portion does come from grant money, does come from private donation, but in order to build sustainability, because we didn't want to be beholden to a couple of individual interests or a couple of large donors, we've built out those revenue streams. But it's still a challenge. Like it's a challenge because you all probably know about HISD's budget cuts, and things that are not directly tied to the instructional core often don't get funded. So we have to prove a case. We have to prove a case this kind of stuff matters. That the way that I've always kind of intuitively understood it is if you ask an affluent parent what are your kids doing after school or during the summer, they will tell you like this long 5-page answer about what they're doing. And you have to almost prove that case that underserved students deserve those things too. Those are things that are deeply important for their sense of personal development. So that's been another challenge.
Now, you mentioned fees for services with HISD in those contracts. For nonprofits, this is one of the challenges that I've always had working with them in diversifying their fundraising streams. We're not going to change the world with galas, grants, and golf tournaments, people. So how can we build in sustainability, and that speaks to earned income revenue streams? What are the products or services that you as an organization can offer to help offset some of your operating costs? And how are you, again, diversifying to Shiroy's point, that you're not relying on one donor or one investor or one sale through your for-profit? So Paola, you have a hybrid model. Would love for you to tell us about that.
Well, I like the people that are conceptualizing all this new wave of things help us understand, because it seems like the line is blurring between away from for-profit and non-for-profit. I mean, it looks to me like the for-profit is acquiring many of the sensibilities of the non-for-profit sector, like now everything that you buy, has some dollars or something that goes to a good cause. And in the non-for-profit, I think that there's some disruption needs to happen there. If you want to have great people that run, manage, or are stakeholders in your non-for-profit, how do you attract them? That talent doesn't go for the below market salary that you can offer to your people. They will go to Google. How do you attract them? So I've been seeing out there very nice, creative and disruptive idea. Like, there's one charity in New York called the Charity Water. They've been calling up big companies to donate some of their equities to the non-for-profit, so the employees can get pieces of those pies and have an incentive to go again to the little non-gagliato, non-for-profit rather than escaping to Google, because we need that kind of talent to be in the non-for-profit world as well. In my case, Nano Gagliato, which is the event that we run every year, and the Accademia di Gagliato, which is the non-for-profit that sustains it, are entirely non-for-profit. The little structure that I built is a totally for-profit. This Nana Shapes. I took inspiration from the shapes of my husband's nanoparticles for the drug delivery and injection in the body as for a line of jewelry. And I got incredible interest from the media and from one in particular international jewelry fair. They called me up. I was part of the first panel on creative, sustainable creativity. So a lot of attention. However, it's an idea person, me, coming from the non-profit sector, now becomes the accidental entrepreneur, the impact entrepreneur. I definitely need someone out there, to come up with support on how do you move along, the growth spectrum. How do you bring your little companies with an idea, but not much legs, not many legs to develop, and how can we become an investment target, as today was indicating. So these are some of the challenges.
Well, and Paola, I really appreciate that you mentioned that when we talk about resources and the resources necessary to make an impact, it's not only money. And something that I am personally obsessed with in my consulting work is mobilizing talent, treasure, and time. And I think where the fourth industrial revolution that Tess mentioned has really come into play here is that another very important resource is data. So how are we providing the funds, the data necessary to make data-informed decisions, and then driving talent to these organizations that can help them succeed? To your point, Paola, if an MBA graduate from the Cameron School of Business here at the University of St. Thomas has the opportunity to make 6 figures right out of school, why would they go be the CEO of a hunger nonprofit where they make $80,000 a year and take a $3,200,000 pay cut? Does that make sense to anyone? Where if they take that 6-figure salary, they can then turn around, be a philanthropist, support the hunger charity that they care about, get a tax break for their deduction, and be lauded as a hero in their community. We do not place the same kind of value on social impact that we do on for-profit investment opportunities. And this is where the hybrid models and the social enterprise models really come into play, because they've recognized that opportunity. They say, hey, we've got talented individuals. Danny and Shiroy are incredibly talented individuals who have said, we recognize the opportunity cost, we're willing to take that because we see a future. And I think that's where developing this ecosystem in impact investing, raising awareness of these opportunities really comes into play. And I believe it might be time to take some questions. So for those of you who are interested in learning more, I could probably just have you shout, but I'm going to see if I can use this app. We'll see how this goes. Let's find out how we can help support their efforts. All right, so, well, this is right in line when we talk about data and mobilizing data as a resource. Gentlemen and lady, how is technology influencing how and when, what's it called? How and when you all interact with the individuals you're trying to impact? So in this case, how are you using technology to meet your consumers and to be informed by your consumers?
So there's lots of ways to slice this, right? So on the base of it, it's like they channel a need and we fill it. But beyond that, right? What we're seeing is in the data, what we're seeing is that there are opportunities to maybe make other organizations, right, nonprofits, health centers, or whatever, help making them smarter by educating them about what their community is needing from a health perspective, right? There are ways for us to integrate with electronic medical records, right, to help the continuum of care, right, cycle, fill out a little bit better, help make medication adherence, right, a bit, more manageable for doctors, for providers, right? There's just a slew of data intelligence that we can use, and we're at the tip of the iceberg. And what's interesting, right, being a social impact company, that's like, when you find those opportunities, that then becomes a primary focus first, right? Not the monetization of it, right? That will come later, right? But you figure out how to deploy that first, right? What's the most equitable way to deploy that? And so, yeah, there's a ton of different ways for us to impact health equity and health disparities.
And I want to make sure that we do address the fact that transparency and accountability plays into this as well, especially when we're talking about EMRs, EHRs, and HIPAA-protected records. So in utilizing the data that your platform collects, what kind of transparency and accountability are you holding your company to?
Yeah. So all of our databases are HIPAA compliant. That's a must. But when it comes to transparency, it's interesting because that's an actual term that we get designated in the industry. So technically, anybody can see the data that we house, right? The aggregate data, not the individual data, but the aggregate data for what's being collected, what's being brought in, and what's being disseminated. So we never sell our data, but we don't engage in any of that, right? something that we will do in the future, and we give our users the option to opt into this if they would like, but if they would like to have their data be used to help make, organizations around them smarter about the delivery of care, right? Those are things that we do. Like data security is a big thing, and I'll kind of chime into this, right? How all of this kind of ties in together. Our very first partner that we worked with was the Houston Health Department here, and that was one of their biggest questions, right? Like nobody's going to know my information, right? Because we serve a large community, of non-English speakers, and so it's just kind of baked into our community at this point.
It bears repeating though, and it bears repeating often because we're touching on a very deep-seated fear for most consumers. You're collecting data about me, what are you doing with it? So appreciate that you've built in transparency to your model. For Shiroy as well, you're collecting information about students.
Yeah, we have to be very cautious, so we're both FERPA and then also compliant as well. And what we gather is a lot of background data around how people are using our website, and we use that to inform which kind of schools that we should be targeting for further outreach. But we're really sensitive about what we're doing with student data. We are also not selling our student data to third parties to advertise to students. And if there's ever a request for a student or a school to delete records, we can probably do that as well. I think we do a better job. I think that data use in education, at least on the consumer side, is something that I personally try to grow in more as well. But in terms of the most important thing that we do with data is we are pretty rigorous about how we actually quantify our impact. So every year we do a massive, elaborate survey of both of our schools, of both of our students. We also do pre and post data around enrichment access and what we're finding about growth, like both attitudinal and then actual quantitative factors like GPA, truancy, and more. And so that data is actually very important for us because that's the data we care about. To see if we're actually serving the students that we want to serve, and then also that we're actually seeing real impacts and real outcomes.
And Paola, how are you utilizing data?
This is a very interesting thing. Well, for one thing, I need to take another side of the question in the sense that we are not at the point of sophistication where, data platform, data gathering platforms are used, but all what we do there in this experiment in Calabria, and also the collection of data, in a way, they are inspired by science, and science and technology for us are the enabler to a better world. And so the mantra that we'll have this year at the conference will be that the science it's for global justice. So this is science. We have a deep kind of focus on it. But what we did in terms of the impact and the measurability of the impact that we produce in this little town, our objective has become to transform this little town in a thriving community from a declining, a dying one. So the measure of what happened is that the London School of Economics and other universities in Europe took notice of what was happening there. So they brought a cohort of students and their professors, and they spent 2 weeks gathering data. So the baseline for what the situation was has been established, and they will come frequently to assess the impact in our population, in school rates, and so on and so forth. So this is how it happened. The technology now is being implied and imported into the experiment to measure the impact that this experience has produced and is going to produce in the very long run.
This is wonderful. It sets us up for success. In our next panel, which is on measuring impact, I'm going to go back to the questions, though. Am I good on time? Okay. So the one that Shiroy mentioned early on, and I think it's probably a question that many people have, in evaluating corporate structure, nonprofit versus for-profit. You mentioned that you have some feelings. I have some feelings as well. So Shiroy and Danny and Paola, when you had to make the decision in terms of your corporate structure, what were those pros and cons that you laid out, and what are your thoughts now, having been in operation for a few years?
Sure, do you want to take this one first? I'm just curious. Because being for profit, I'm like, I don't know.
Pros and cons of for-profit and non-profit.
And your feelings now.
Well, so one jump, we began thinking about it in 2014. And maybe if we had been on the coast, I think social enterprise would have been talked about a bit more. But in Houston, if you're trying to do something around social good or social impact at that time, I think it was a little bit before benefit corporations were talked about. B Corp certification was kind of just being talked about. And I think there's only 2 or 3 B Corps in all of Houston right now too. So this understanding that you could do well and do good was early in Houston. But what was even earlier would be the capital that would back that up, right? So if you were to explain to an investor, I want to build a for-profit web platform that connects students to enrichment opportunities, but I do not want to target any affluent neighborhoods, that would be kind of nonsensical. Like, how would you prove out a revenue model then? We were told to Robinhood if we want to go for-profit, like, just get money from St. John's and like disperse it else to whatever else other school you want to. And I think that the challenge around the for-profit at least was the capital that I encountered, the people that I encountered, I think had a hard time reconciling doing a technology platform or doing education and making that work as a for-profit. In fact, some extremely prominent, like I won't say the name, but if you probably know the name if you were in the education sphere, explicitly told us that if you went for-profit, schools wouldn't want to work with you, and partners wouldn't because they don't trust for-profits. It's like hugely in education space. So at that time, it didn't seem really tenable for us for a lot of different reasons. I think that now that's changed. I think that there's plenty of examples of successful social good tech companies that weren't quite the case at that time. And so I think that you can do it, and I think especially if you're doing technology, to build a world-class product that has really great adoption, you're going to have to spend a lot of money on technology. Otherwise, you're going to be outsourcing that tech, and that's going to create a lot of technical debt for you long-term, and that's going to be a problem. So I think the landscape of ship is simple. The pros around the nonprofit is that your social missions front and center and never has to be bastardized or compromised. You can achieve that also with the benefit corporation or having really phenomenal investors or a very strong board, but you run the risk as a for-profit that if you're really out to do mission-first work, that you may not make that decision for beyond a couple of years as your control of the corporation gets diluted. So that's something to think about as well too. You can achieve a compromise through benefit corporate structure, and that's different than B Corp certification. At the heart of the benefit corporation is baked into your bylaws some things that are true and that cannot be compromised around social or whatever else you want to adhere to. I have heard, and it's actually probably a great part for the next panel, that some investors have been reticent around investing in benefit corporations because if it comes to an acquisition offer or something down the road, that part that's baked into the bylaws could be a problem. So these are kind of like the funny nuances in the conversation, and I think it's really dependent upon what is your real mission, what are your real motivations. I think that should partially guide how you think about your corporate structure. And you can do some clever things with hybrids. You can have a nonprofit and a for-profit that work in tandem. Have separate boards, have smart, what's the word for it? There's a word around like corruption and ensuring that you're not like, it's strong governance policies, but specifically, I forget the exact term right now. But there are ways to do this, and there are examples of hybrid corporate structures too.
So I'll say I served on the launch team for a public benefit corporation out of Austin, a fintech product called Charity Charge. And I'm not getting equity right now, so I can say this. But the decision to be a PBC, a public benefit corporation, was one that was carefully debated. Charity Charge is a MasterCard product that allows you a chance to donate a percentage of your proceeds that you otherwise would get in points back to charities of your choice. So putting the mission first, Shiroy, as you said, had to come front and center, but we had to also demonstrate there were going to be returns. I mean, we're working with MasterCard. Why would MasterCard want to work with us if they didn't see a benefit from them? I do appreciate the changing environment, and that's part of what this conference is all about. For Shiroy in 2014 to say, I can't do this. There is no vehicle, there is no pathway clear to me to do good besides being a nonprofit. And today in 2019, and thanks to you in the room who are here participating, actively learning and engaging, we know you're going to share this with others. You are helping us to create those pathways to offer these entrepreneurs and these do-gooders choice. All right, so let's go back to your questions, and there were some rather intriguing ones here. So this goes back to funding. And beyond your corporate structure, what is the biggest challenge you have faced in fundraising? And secondary, do you have enough available financing sources to sustain your growth? And what are your go-to sources, equity, debt, grants, etc., that you're considering for your model? So let's talk about biggest challenges in fundraising. Let's talk about burn rate and runway. And let's talk about those vehicles that are appropriate for your models and what you're considering.
So for us, what we look to leverage is equity. That's the structure that we build our viability through, or we build our platform through, I should say, at least originally. From a burn rate perspective, our runway right now is we have plenty of runway. There's no plan to.
Real quick, let me say this. There might be investors in the room,
Okay.
so let's make this a pitch, okay?
Well, let me start that over. If there are any interested investors in the room, we just so happen to have our deal lead from the Southwest Angel Network, Bob Bridge, here. So if you want to talk to him or myself, please swing by. I'm shameless in my pitch for that. As far as our run rate goes, I mean, we're good to go. We're viable. Where we're struggling right now is scaling our customer acquisition, essentially. Our model is proven. We, users in all 50 states. We've filled tens of thousands of planes at this point, right? And so now all the ratios are there, and we just need to take that money and apply it, essentially. So that's kind of where our problem is. I'll say a secondary problem, just if anybody's curious. I won't say it's a problem, it's more of a challenge. If you're an entrepreneur of color, or if you're a female entrepreneur, something that I know is, at least in Texas, is you don't see a lot of like faces kind of looking back at you as you're raising funds. And so, I mean, I'm not sure how everybody else felt, but I know I felt something, right? Like I felt that the connection might have been harder to make. It could have been something I created, except for there's data to prove that it's not made up, right? So that is also a challenge that I just want to be honest about. It's true, it's out there, and hopefully, like I love seeing the diversity in this room. That's super, super important. I'm excited to see more of that in the space.
I'm so very glad that you mentioned that, Danny, and I think all of us sitting at this table can speak to that to some degree as well. So I have other things I can say on that, but Shiroy.
I spoke a lot last time.
No, again, can you rephrase the...
So in terms of your fundraising.
Sorry, I was starting for that. The fundraising is certainly a challenge, and in our non-for-profit, I'm talking about that one for now, we devised a scheme, a structure where sponsors, and we're looking for corporations can come and pitch in, and we usually go back to the package of what they are getting from their sponsorship. However, one challenge that I think all non-profits have is that when you go out and talk about your non-for-profit, one important thing that you tend to emphasize is 100% of what goes directly to impact. And that is impossible. So it looks like it's a competition between who can get as close to 100 directly into impact. So I heard of other creative ways that this can be addressed, like creating two different lines of fundraising. One where you have donors that are in a way, involved in what you do. They are stakeholders of your nonprofit, and they might be persuading you to pay for overhead. And whereas when you go out and ask for money to the general public, you can claim and tell that all that's raised This might sound like a gimmick, but in any case, when it comes to non-profit, sometimes you have to again figure out creative ways to get a little bit of an edge, a competitive edge out there. So this is.
Well, and I'll say, I'm sure Shiroy can appreciate this as well. I don't know where it happened along the line, but somewhere along the line in nonprofit fundraising, operations and overhead became dirty words. And the reality is that without those sources of finance, you can't do what you do. And so this is a challenge to everyone in a shift in mindset. Our traditional philanthropic model grew out of such of assuaging guilt. When the Presbyterian pilgrims came over, they said, you know what, we're here to be capitalists, but we feel guilty about that, so let's create a model that assuages our guilt. We have to shake that. And we have to consider empowering these organizations, and that speaks to their bottom line. Their overhead, their operations, keeping the lights on means you can do what you do. So I'd also like to speak then a little bit about what Danny mentioned, which is challenges in fundraising for female entrepreneurs, for entrepreneurs of color. I also work with the LGBT Chamber of Commerce, so those that are underrepresented. So Paola, Shiroy, and Danny, this is emotional stuff. Are you willing to share your experience a little? Good.
So, I mean, I'll be really quick, I'm sure everybody, like, I pitched at every angel network in Texas, at least that I know of, that I can find online, right? And I can count on one hand, literally one hand, the amount of African American investors I saw represented there. Now, there's probably a larger amount, part of them they just couldn't make it to that pitch, but still, right, the fact still remains that that's the case. And 2 African American women I saw the entire time, right? And so, and like the data that kind of follows that, right? There was a study, a language analysis study done at MIT that studied the questions given to women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color, and the types of questions that they get are 70% of the questions they get are geared with a negative assumption. Now, this is just a speaker in a room recording all of the words said and indexing all negative words versus all positive words when it came to investor questions. I mean, the bias is very real. Like, it's not, you know what I mean? It's not a fake thing. And I mean, so it's troubling, but at the same time, like Shiroy said, I think you said best in class. At the end of the day, that's what we want. We want to be best in class at what we're doing. And so regardless of what that data says, at the end of the day, we just have to choose to not let it matter, right? Like, impact is our goal, that's our focus, and like, we'll keep speaking and talking until everybody else believes in it as much as we do.
I'd like to say that when you are part and an activist in the non-for-profit world, traditionally and culturally, we think that it's mostly the women area. Okay, so I have to confess that pitching for my cause and trying to raise funds for the non-for-profit has not been much of a challenge. However, when it comes to the for-profit, as an impact entrepreneur, there is a different set of issues. And now I want to mention an initiative that Tess and I are involved in that got an official launch, a soft launch at Nano Gagliato, the international conference in Italy 2 years ago, last year, and this year has been launched from the United Nations during the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. So we, as Tessa today was expressing, we need a more balanced allocation of resources in the world. That's the conduit, actually that's the condition sine qua non to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So we need more women that run for profit, more women that go from the millions to the billions. So we really need to extend that share. And so not only we're trying to think of what's the best pipeline, we think starts from STEM to get women to entrepreneurship and success. What are the challenges to growth? How can we help female entrepreneurs become Bill Gates? And we need more Bill Gates, not only because they were very rich, but because I read they saved the Bill through their philanthropic efforts, through their initiative, 120 million lives. So can you imagine that going to bed the night knowing that, because of your being a successful entrepreneur and then an incredible philanthropist, you're responsible, direct or indirect, for 120 million people. So we want find a woman, Bill Gates, more women, Bill Gates.
So I mentioned that I'm a recovering social worker. One of the ideas I've kept in my back pocket on a napkin for years and years is a digital health application. And the reason that I sat on it for so long launching this year was that I did not see a path to success. As Shiroy said, he didn't see a path to success if he went down the nonprofit route. And for me, that was looking at the landscape and saying, I don't know where I would find the funding for this. It's one of the reasons that I became involved with the Texas Impact Alliance and Southern Impact Investing Alliance as well. I wanted to learn about this ecosystem, and I wanted to impact it. I'm excited that in Houston, and I've worked with these amazing women, they've launched the Artemis Fund. So a VC fund targeting female entrepreneurs. So if you don't see a path to success for yourself, change it. Get involved. I'd love to talk to y'all about Texas Impact Alliance. There's also Impact Hub Houston. So Shiroy, knowing that this is going to feed into our next sessions, why don't you take us out with Impact Hub Houston and where they can find out more. And then Danny and Paola, I'd like you all to tell us where they can find out more as well.
These kinds of conversations are near and dear to my heart because I wish that these conversations were happening 5 years ago for myself. Like selfishly, good. This would have been very beneficial. And what we're doing with Impact Hub Houston is we're one of many organizations in Houston that are trying to bring this kind of conversation to the fore, trying to create a community where you feel understood if you're a social entrepreneur. If you want to ask what you might think is a dumb question about should I do a nonprofit or a for-profit or how should I structure my board or whatever it might be, we want to be that safe place where you feel like you can ask those questions and you can be around like-minded people who also want to leverage business and do good in the world. And so whether you're a social entrepreneur, whether you're a change maker, whether you're a supporter and you want to be a part of that kind of community or you want to support the next generation of entrepreneurs who are trying to do great work and make a difference, that's what we're doing in Houston, and we just so happen to be connected to a global network of 99 other hubs across the world that are doing the exact same thing. And so we partner with the United Nations to drive solutions around those 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And in Houston, we're just about to launch our community membership, which would be one opportunity for you to be able to actually engage with our community more deeply. So do find myself, do find Grace after this panel, and we'll be around if you want to talk more.
And Grace will share a little more. Website for One Jump and for Impact Hub, and then Danny and Paola, website, social impact handles as well.
OneJump.org, ONEJUMP.org. For Impact Hub Houston, houston.impacthub.net.
Danny.
Now, for us, if you want to find out more about our platform, Scriptly, SCRIPTLYRX.com, scriptlyrx.com. If you want to see some of what we're doing on the nonprofit side, scriptlyrx.org. If you want a fun IG handle to follow Instagram, scriptlyrx. And to prove that you guys are there, go to our Instagram and take the Lyme Challenge, right? So we're helping raise awareness for Lyme disease this month, and all you gotta do is cut into a lime, eat it, and donate some money. So, so yeah, do that.
Okay, our enterprises are nanogaliato.org, GAGLIATO.org, and nanoshapes.com. This is the for-profit, but I really want to make a pitch for the Equality Moonshot, which is this initiative I was mentioning to bring at least to 30% the share of women's wealth in the world by possibly 2050. So look us up. I call it Moonshot. We don't have a website yet, but we have a platform with great videos and talks and materials that you can access as an encouragement for women in the audience or women that you know that might become the next Bill Gates.
Excellent. So, yes, please.
So I just, one more thing, because I know you guys are gonna rush down and try to get us
Mob
dollars.
them.
Right, and mob us. So, and if you all know any friends who want to invest, you guys are more than happy to show them. Email Danny at SIIA.com.
So the panelists and I will be available for a few questions after, in between the next sessions. And we want to thank again the University of St. Thomas and the Cameron School of Business. At the Cameron School of Business, they are one of the few schools here in our community that actually offers a course on social enterprise management. Correct? And Dr. George, would you like to speak about that course a little?
Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, panelists. So we offer a program, Certificate in Social Entrepreneurship, that covers entrepreneurship, how you can make an impact using different developmental models, business model innovation, and an experiential course. So it's a group of 4 courses that students complete to get the certificate in social entrepreneurship.